My contribution presentation for Social Work 306 is on A. Philip Randolph. A. Philip Randolph was a civil rights activist and leader during the 20th century. He was known for his socialist views, he was a labor organizer, and he worked to achieve equitable labor rights for African Americans. Asa Philip Randolph was born April 15, 1889, in Crescent City, Florida. He had one brother, and his father was a Methodist minister. He attended the Cookman Institute in Jacksonville, Florida. This is a picture that I found of it, and it was one of the first institutes for higher education for blacks in the country. In 1911, he moved to Harlem neighborhood in New York City. He attended the City College at night, where he studied English literature and sociology. During the day, he worked as an elevator operator, a porter, and a waiter, and this exposure to the black working class gave him the idea that this is where the hope for the black progress lied. In 1912, he founded the Brotherhood of Labor alongside Chandler Owen. This was an employment agency designed to organize black workers. He decided that unions were African Americans' best shot to improve their plot in society. His efforts began while working as a waiter on a coastal steamship, which this is a picture of one at the time. In 1913, he met and married Lucille Green, who was a Howard University graduate. Together they organized a society in Harlem called Ye Friends of Shakespeare, and they put on a number of Shakespeare's plays. Randolph actually showed his thespian side by playing the lead role in many of the plays, including Othello and Romeo and Juliet. In 1917, Randolph and Owen found The Messenger, which was a political magazine with socialist views designed for an African-American audience. Randolph wanted to unionize African-American shipyard workers and elevator operators in New York City. He wanted to encourage them to demand for higher wages and an inclusion of blacks in the armed forces and war industry. After the end of World War I, he lectured at the Rand School of Social Science. This was a socialist school formed by the Socialist Party, and this is a picture of the building where it used to be located. In the early 1920s, he ran for office in New York State on the Socialist Party ticket, but was unsuccessful. In 1925, he founded the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. The purpose was to improve working conditions for nearly 10,000 black railroad employees. They wanted full integration of black workers into the American Trade Union. It was based off the idea that they could never be politically free until economically secure. It took a while, but eventually in 1937, it successfully became the first official African-American labor union in the American Federation of Labor. After he left this, he headed the National Negro Congress, which was an umbrella movement for mass organizations. In 1941, he organized the March on Washington. The goal of this march was to pressure FDR into banning discrimination in defense industries. He was successful, and the march was called off when President Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 8802. In 1948, he organized the League for Nonviolent Civil Disobedience Against Military Segregation. He warned President Truman that if segregation was not abolished, a lot of African Americans would refuse to enter the armed forces. This led Harry S. Truman to issue Executive Order 9981, which officially banned racial segregation in the U.S. Armed Forces. In 1955, he became the vice president of the newly merged AFL-CIO, which is the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations. In 1957, he led a prayer pilgrimage to Washington, D.C. to draw attention to the delay of school desegregation in the South. In 1963, he helped organize the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. About 250,000 people showed up to support, and this is where MLK gave his famous speech, I Have a Dream. Randolph aimed to obtain government sponsorship for black jobs. However, it was overshadowed by the Southern Civil Rights Movement. In 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson awarded Randolph the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Later that year, Randolph founded the A. Philip Randolph Institute. The aim of this institute was to study the causes of poverty in the United States. In 1965, he attended the White House Conference, where he proposed a poverty elimination program called the Freedom Budget Act for All Americans. Some of the goals of this program were to abolish poverty, guarantee full employment, fair prices for farmers, fair wages for workers, and housing and health care for all. Because of a heart condition and high blood pressure, he resigned from his positions in public life. He decided to dedicate this time to writing his autobiography, which he worked on until his death. He died in New York City on May 16, 1979, at the age of 90. Philip Randolph had a large influence on the civil rights movement. He led the way with peaceful, nonviolent protests, and he proved that if a large amount of people showed up to raise their voices, they would be seen and heard, and that could enact change. Here are some quick highlights of the things that Randolph achieved with the help of other civil rights leaders. Discrimination was banned in the defense industries, the U.S. Armed Forces were desegregated, and the first African American labor union was formed. I found this quote online, and I think it sums up pretty well Philip Randolph's beliefs. It says, "A community is democratic only when the humblest and weakest person can enjoy the highest civil, economic, and social rights that the biggest and most powerful possess." I'm pretty sure that not a lot of people today would recognize the name Philip Randolph, especially not people in my generation, but I know that all of us feel the lasting impact of the many movements that he worked so diligently on and dedicated his life to.